Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Freightwaves Now on this wonderful Friday morning edition. We have a jam-packed show for you today. I'm Thomas Watson. Joining me, of course, is Bill Priestley. And starting this wonderful show, of course, is going to be our Friday edition of the world-famous Economy Lately coming up a little later. And we'll have Patrick Berglund of Zenetta.com calling in from Oslo to talk about ocean contract rates. But first, a bit of a change of pace as we have with us Alan Adler to talk about his weekly Truck Tech segment and the expansion of Everywhere edition. Alan, welcome, sir. It's welcome for real this time.
Yeah.
I didn't know we had that extra long fancy.
I like that intro. I'm new to this community thing, and it's funny, since we moved out here to West Michigan, I talk to my wife all the time about the need to build community. So we're doing it. We're building community at work, which I think is great. But
Alan, great to have you with us. Obviously,
hey, thanks, Bill.
Now you've got a very interesting title here to this edition of Truck Tech: Expansion Everywhere. Where are you going with this?
Okay, well, it came up actually this morning when I was realizing that I had inadvertently created four segments of the newsletter, all of which had to do with expansion. I was originally just going to go with Cummins expanding its electrolyzer business, which is interesting, and that's kind of the essay in the newsletter this week on what they're doing. We wrote about electrolyzers not too long ago, and for those who don't know what those are, that's the chemical process using water to basically split hydrogen out of water using electricity. It's all explained in the newsletter. But the point is that Cummins is making a very big business out of it and is continuing to grow that. We wrote a longer piece a few months ago for the website about the subject. Today, we kind of get back into that. Then I started looking, I said, wait a minute, this next item is an expansion, and this item is an expansion. So that's where it comes from.
So yeah, you've got a lot of different areas you want to jump into. Where do we want to go first here?
Well, let's quickly talk about Cummins. What's interesting there, it comes off of the fourth quarter earnings call this week. When you search the transcripts for earnings calls, you can often find themes that will lead you to stories. And electrolyzers comes up a lot because the new power business segment at Cummins comes up a lot. They expect that could be a $6 to $13 billion revenue business by 2030. It's not making money yet. It is gross margin profitable as of last quarter, but it is something that, bears watching. And as Cummins it reinvents itself in its 104th year, you're going to hear more and more about this, maybe a little less about traditional diesel engines, but believe me, they're still big there too. So the first item, gets into this a little bit. Then we realized that down in Mexico, Navistar is spending $120 million to expand its cab painting business at the Escobedo plant, and thought, okay, that's worth noting. And then we also we don't write a lot about BorgWarner here, but we do occasionally write about them. They're a tier one supplier that is, are you ready, expanding its electrification business, and in a big way. I basically just cribbed off notes from Jeff Osborne at Cowen in terms of his read on the fourth quarter earnings over there and the fourth quarter results. And they're way ahead of their goals. They said in December they were going to spin off most of the rest of their aftermarket business and some other business just to focus on electrification. That's freed up some money to do some more M&A activity in that space. So, again, BorgWarner, not a company that we cover a lot, but from a tier one perspective, has really got it going on in electrification in an expansion kind of way.
Yeah, so Alan, as we kind of look at this from, say, for instance, a 50,000-foot view, there's a lot of this going on. I mean, as you mentioned, there's a lot of this going on in a lot of different areas. Are companies really starting to diversify to try and get a little bit wider, to try and maybe get more of a handle on part of the industry? Or are they just kind of going away from the idea of specialization and sticking to one particular thing?
Well, in Cummins' case, they're going to be big everywhere. That's a $25 billion business. They're going to continue. In fact, Bill, they are picking up more engine making business in the medium duty space with Daimler. That was announced a couple of years ago, but there's probably some more of that kind of activity coming. And what's interesting there is that the companies are turning to Cummins, in this case, to pick up work that they don't want to invest in anymore. But Cummins has both the technology and the emissions credentials and things like that to help take on those businesses. So they're going to stay in that sort of bread and butter space. But they're really, really looking at, what does 2050 look like, what they call Destination Zero, and, how are they going to get there? This company, we probably written 3 stories this week about them. They're into everything. And next week's guest on Truck Tech will be Jose Samperio, who is the new head of the on-highway business for Cummins. We had a chat with him yesterday, and it's one of these things that, he's an interesting guy. He's worked in the sales space and is now taking over all of that on-highway business. So I'm not sure there's a way to answer that question completely, except that, if you look at a BorgWarner, they're focused on electrification. They're looking at the future. They're not looking at doing some of the hardware that they once were famous for. You look at Mack Trucks. Okay, this is more of a manufacturer and OEM perspective. They got 2 years ago, they returned to the medium duty business. This is in the newsletter today as well. And they just built their 10,000th medium duty truck. Their timing was exquisite, really, because about 2 years ago during the pandemic is when medium duty trucks and last mile and middle mile delivery became so important. And they saw kind of a steady state market of 100,000 units a year, not for them, for the industry. That's now looking more like 125 to 140,000 units in 2023. So the pie is getting bigger, and they've already got a little better, like 5.3% share in a couple of years, which is a pretty impressive entry, coming off something they just started to do a few years ago.
And regarding this expansion, talking about as well net orders in January, OEM build orders for Class 8s that you had written on earlier. Is this something where we're seeing OEMs try to expand to fill this growing demand, or is this something where perhaps we're just retooling and getting ready for electrification and diversifying?
Well, I think mostly, Thomas, we're dealing with a pent-up demand issue, and we've talked about that a few times here. I don't know what the current number is. I should probably ask the folks at ACT or at FTR and find out what they're saying. But we were talking about 80 to 100,000 units of pent-up demand for Class 8 trucks. That's because nobody's been able to build at sort of normal rates for most of the last 3 years. Now they're getting back to it. We've got a lot of fleets that want to get out of trucks that they held on to a little longer than they wanted to, and they want new iron, they want new equipment. So, we could expect, I think, this year to see, another year of, call it 300,000 units of production. That doesn't mean they'll sell 300,000. Cummins comes in, let's say with Cummins, they come in a little below that. They look at 260 to 280. But everybody uses a little bit different math for this number. The point is, it should be a good year for Class 8 truck production, as well as, we'll see orders, meeting kind of demand now. I think the backlogs are still around 9 months to get a truck if you order it today.
And a follow-up question on earlier, you're talking about, I think it was Cummins that was going into electrochargers, or correct me if I'm wrong. What exactly is that type of hardware, and what's the opportunity with that $13 billion in terms of output?
Okay, yeah. What I said was electrolyzers. These are devices or systems that basically make hydrogen. They're kind of the opposite of a fuel cell, and I'm going to let the readers see the difference there rather than explain them here. But basically, it's a chemical technology that essentially is for making hydrogen. Then ultimately, if you make a fuel cell, that's what you put the hydrogen into for fuel. So this is just an area where we're seeing more and more of this now. I mean, for years, the hydrogen economy was way off. We had a good discussion this week. People can go back and watch the episode from Wednesday from Truck Tech. We had a good discussion with Nikola and with a company called Hexagon Purus, which makes the tanks, the hydrogen tanks, tanks for vehicles, as well as lots of other applications, because hydrogen has a role in many parts of the economy, well beyond trucking. So this electrolyzer thing, this is a technology, and it's something that I think we quote a marketing research group in there. It's looking like $130 billion across the world by 2033. I mean, even if it makes half that, that's huge. And these are things that are, again, looking more at the total hydrogen economy than just the trucking business.
And we've got about 30 seconds left here. Do you feel like this is these decisions, as they are being made and as they are expanding, would have been made regardless of the fact of the economic times that we're seeing, or are they just trying to take advantage of perhaps a jump on what's going to be coming in the future?
I don't think, Bill, that the OEMs specifically necessarily pay as much attention to the headlines as we do and to the analysts. I think they make their business plans, they look at what kind of capital expenditures they can make, and they make them. And I think that's what's going on more than anything else. They're just running their businesses.
Absolutely. Alan Adler, Truck Tech, coming up. Thanks for joining us, Alan.
Thank you very much.
We're coming up on Wednesdays, and again, that's a great show if you want to get into just the very basics and the very advanced stages of what people are doing in truck technology.
If you want to learn about trucks and techs, definitely check it out. We're going to toss it over to the wall for our first look at the carrier update.